In ancient China, the story is told of a master who taught without ever uttering a word. His disciples came from afar to receive his wisdom, sat in a circle around him, and left transformed after hours spent in profound silence. One day, an impatient visitor challenged him, "Master, when will you finally teach us?" The sage smiled gently and replied, "Have you not heard what I have never ceased telling you?" This anecdote, which has traversed the centuries in Chinese tradition, captures the essence of a fascinating paradox. How can silence be more eloquent than the most refined speech? How can the absence of words transmit a wisdom that entire libraries could not contain? Our era is passing through a profound crisis of silence that would have alarmed Confucius and Lao Tzu alike. This crisis manifests not only through the increase in external noise, though our cities have indeed become increasingly loud, but through a more subtle and more troubling transformation in our inner relationship to silence and speech. From the Confucian point of view, we are witnessing a general decline in the traditional virtues that favored the cultivation of silence. The deference toward elders, which implied a respectful listening to their wisdom, gives way to a culture of immediate opinion, where everyone feels authorized to speak about everything without necessarily having the required experience or knowledge. This inflation of individual ego at the expense of recognizing collective wisdom constitutes one of the major obstacles to authentic silence. The respect for natural hierarchies, not blind obedience, but that recognition that experience and cultivation merit deference, is progressively disappearing from our societies. This loss creates a climate where everyone's speech is supposed to be worth everyone else's, regardless of its relevance or depth. The result is a generalized chatter where quantity prevails over quality, where immediate opinion supplants mature reflection. On the Taoist side, the diagnosis concerns our growing distance from natural simplicity PU. We have created a world of artificial complexity that cuts us off from our natural biological and cosmic rhythms. This complexity generates a permanent anxiety that we attempt to calm through an incessant flow of distraction, stimulation, and speech. We have lost this capacity to simply be present to what is without needing to comment on it, analyze it, share it immediately. This flight from silence often reveals a profound fear, that of finding ourselves face to face with ourselves without the masks and roles that define us socially. Authentic silence confronts us with questions we prefer to avoid. Who are we really? What do we truly want? What truly gives meaning to our existence? This confrontation with the essential can be destabilizing for those unprepared for it. Social networks and digital technologies considerably amplify these tendencies. They create an illusion of permanent connection that often masks profound solitude. The obligation to constantly share one's thoughts, emotions, and activities transforms intimacy into spectacle and silence into something suspect. Those who do not post, do not comment, do not react immediately to every social stimulus are perceived as absent or antisocial. This permanent overexposure of oneself progressively destroys that interiority necessary for authentic silence. How can we cultivate a rich inner life when everything is immediately externalized, exhibited, submitted to the judgment of others? This compulsive externalization deprives us of those moments of silent maturation where experiences transform into wisdom, where raw emotions refine into deep understanding. The confusion between silence and pathological mutism constitutes another major obstacle. Our therapeutic culture sometimes tends to pathologize silence, to systematically see in it a symptom of depression, repression, or social dysfunction. This reductive vision prevents distinguishing creative silence from mortifying silence, wise restraint from morbid inhibition. This confusion is particularly damaging in education. Children who prefer to observe rather than speak, to reflect rather than react immediately, are often considered to have a problem that must be corrected. This pathologizing of the contemplative temperament deprives our society of precious diversity and pushes toward normalizing a single model of sociability. The general acceleration of the pace of life also constitutes a structural obstacle to silence. In a world where everything must go faster and faster, where efficiency is measured by speed of reaction, the time necessary for silent reflection appears as a luxury we can no longer afford. This logic of permanent urgency methodically destroys the conditions necessary for cultivating silence. And finally, the loss of spaces and times traditionally devoted to silence contributes to this crisis. Libraries become noisy, collaborative workspaces. Public transportation resonates with telephone conversations. Even places of worship are often filled with music and animation. This disappearance of sanctuaries of silence in public space deprives our society of refuges necessary for contemplation and recollection. As Confucius would observe, this crisis of silence reflects a deeper crisis of personal cultivation. He saw in silence a cardinal virtue of the exemplary person, the Yunzi. For him, knowing when to remain silent testifies to a superior wisdom, a self-mastery that distinguishes the cultivated being from the vulgar chatterer. Reflect 3 times before speaking, he counseled, valuing this restraint that allows thought to ripen before manifesting in speech. Lao Tzu, for his part, perceived in silence the original simplicity of the Tao. Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know, he affirmed, pointing toward this truth that direct experience always transcends the discourse that claims to describe it. In his vision, silence is not only a human wisdom, but participation in the cosmic order itself. This convergence is not fortuitous. It reveals a profound intuition shared by these 2 great voices. Authentic silence opens a space where what is noblest in the human being can unfold. It permits true listening, cultivates wise restraint, and reveals those dimensions of communion that escape ordinary language. This wisdom of silence expresses itself through 3 essential dimensions. First, the silence of true listening, which transforms our relationship to others. Then, the silence of wise restraint, which elevates the quality of our expression. Finally, the silence of deep communion, which reconnects us to the essence of our humanity. One who knows how to listen hears what is not said, Confucius teaches us in the Analerta. This phrase reveals one of the richest dimensions of silence, its capacity to create the space necessary for authentic listening, that which goes beyond words to grasp the essential of what is communicated between beings. In Confucian thought, true listening constitutes one of the fundamental virtues of the exemplary person, the Junzi. It is not limited to simple passive reception of information, but engages our entire being in an act of recognition and respect toward others. This silent listening becomes a moral act in itself, a way of honoring the dignity of the one who confides in us. Observe the difference between one who listens to understand and one who listens to respond. The first cultivates within themselves an attentive silence, suspends their judgments, puts their own preoccupations in parentheses to fully welcome the other's words. The second, on the contrary, uses moments of silence only to prepare their reply, their argument, their demonstration of superiority. Their silence is only apparent. Inwardly, they chatter ceaselessly. This distinction takes particular importance in the relationships that structure Confucian society. Filial piety, for example, does not consist only in obeying one's parents, but in hearing with respect what their life experience has to transmit to us. The silent listening becomes a form of devotion that enriches both receiver and giver alike. Similarly, the disciples listening toward their master creates that sacred space where true transmission can occur, not only of knowledge but of embodied wisdom. The Confucian leader, whether family patriarch or emperor, also cultivates this quality of listening. Mencius emphasized that the good governor knows how to remain silent in order to hear the real needs of their people beyond the flatteries of court and official reports. This silent listening thus becomes an instrument of social justice and collective harmony. This listening takes on an even more contemplative dimension among the Taoists. Zhuangzi speaks to us of that quality of attention he calls listening with one's breath, rather than with one's ears or even one's mind. The ear is limited to sound, the mind to representations, while the breath forms a hollow app to welcome the external world. This hollow of the breath is precisely that space of inner silence that permits total receptivity. This Taoist listening participates in Wu Wei, that art of effortless action that characterizes the being in harmony with the Tao. To listen according to Wu Wei is not to impose our interpretive grids on what we hear, not to force the other to fit into our preconceived categories. It is to let their speech unfold in the space our silence offers them, as water naturally finds its path in the welcoming valley. This convergence between the Confucian and Taoist approaches to listening reveals a profound truth. Authentic silence transforms the quality of our relationships. It creates an intimacy that goes well beyond simple exchange of information. In this shared silence, something deeper is communicated, that mutual recognition of our common humanity, which is perhaps the basis of all true encounter. Concretely, this silent listening is cultivated in our simplest gestures. When our child tells us about their day, do we know how to suspend our activities to be fully present to their account? When our spouse is going through difficulty, do we resist the temptation to immediately give advice in order to simply welcome their pain? When a colleague expresses disagreement, can we hear their position without immediately preparing our counterattack? This quality of listening also transforms our relationship to ourselves. For learning to listen to others is also developing this capacity to hear our own inner voices, our intuitions, our subtle emotions, those messages that our body and soul never cease addressing to us, but which the noise of our compulsive thoughts so often drowns out. As Chinese wisdom teaches, in the silence of listening is born the wisdom of response. For one who has truly heard naturally knows what to say, or better still, when to remain silent. Their speech, when it comes, springs from that deep understanding that only attentive silence can reveal. The sage speaks little and acts much, Confucius teaches us, pointing toward that quality of restraint which distinguishes mature speech from impulsive speech. This restraint is not timidity or lack of assurance, but the expression of a wisdom that understands the weight and responsibility of each word pronounced. In Confucian ethics, speech is never neutral. It carries within it the power to build or destroy, to elevate or diminish, to gather or divide. This understanding of the power of words naturally engenders an attitude of prudence and measure. Reflect 3 times before speaking, counsels the Master, for inconsiderate speech can cause irreparable damage. Wise restraint manifests first in avoiding what Confucius called vain words, those discourses that serve only to fill the void, to shine in society, or to mask our own unease with silence. The Yunzi, the exemplary person, prefers significant silence to insignificant chatter. They understand that silence can sometimes express more respect, wisdom, or compassion than the finest speeches. This restraint extends particularly to hurtful words. Mencius developed this idea by emphasizing that personal cultivation, zhuyang, necessarily includes mastery of one's tongue, not to repress one's emotions or opinions, but to express them constructively rather than destructively. How many relationships have been broken by words spoken in anger, by hasty judgments, by reproaches formulated at the wrong moment? Confucian restraint also concerns the protection of others' secrets and intimacy. Knowing how to remain silent about what has been confided to us testifies to a fundamental moral integrity. This discretion creates the trust without which no deep relationship is possible. It also protects against slander and gossip that poison the social atmosphere. On the Taoist side, this restraint takes a different but complementary coloration. Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know. Lao Tzu affirms with that disconcerting simplicity that characterizes his teachings. This phrase does not condemn speech itself, but points toward a subtle truth. Direct experience of truth always transcends its verbal description. This Taoist restraint is born from recognition of the fundamental inadequacy between lived experience and its translation into words. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. The Tao Te Ching begins, establishing from the outset this mistrust toward the pretension of language to circumscribe the essential. This linguistic humility naturally engenders a restraint that prefers showing to telling, being to explaining. This convergence between Confucian and Taoist restraint reveals a common wisdom, one that understands that the less we speak, the more weight our words carry. Like a sculptor who removes material to reveal the hidden form, one who cultivates restraint eliminates verbal surplus to let the essential emerge. This wise restraint manifests concretely in numerous situations of our daily life. Faced with unjust criticism, resisting the impulse to justify oneself immediately often permits a more measured and more effective response. In conflict, knowing how to pause before responding can transform a destructive escalation into constructive dialogue. As parents, learning to resist the temptation to constantly give advice allows our children to develop their own capacity for reflection. This restraint also transforms our relationship to opinion and judgment. Our era suffers from an inflation of commentary. Everyone feels obligated to have an opinion on everything and to express it immediately. The wisdom of restraint invites us to finer discernment. On what do I truly have sufficient knowledge to deserve to speak? Will my words bring something constructive, or do they merely add to the ambient noise? Wise restraint also cultivates that quality of speech the Chinese call words like gold, rare, precious, weighed. One who speaks little but justly naturally acquires a moral authority that surpasses that of the most brilliant orator. Their silences become eloquent. Their rare interventions carry particular weight. As a Chinese proverb magnificently expresses, deep words are born from deep silence. This restraint does not impoverish our expression. It enriches it by giving it that density, that authenticity that can only be born from the silent maturation of thought and feeling. Between true friends, there is no need for words, Confucius observed, revealing this dimension of silence that transcends simple communication to attain a form of communion uniting beings beyond words. This third facet of silence makes us discover that the most precious moments of human existence are often lived in a shared presence that does not need language to express itself. In the Confucian tradition, this silent communion finds its noblest expressions in the ritualized relationships that structure society. Moments of family recollection before the ancestors, for example, create a sacred space where the essential of family identity is transmitted, not through speeches, but through this respectful presence that connects generations. These ritual silences carry within them all the richness of collective memory and shared values. The relationship between master and disciples offers another example of this silent communion. Confucius himself reported that his best students were often those who knew how to remain beside him in silence, absorbing by osmosis that quality of being which cannot be transmitted by words alone. This silent presence permits a form of teaching deeper than all lectures, one that transforms the very being of the disciple through proximity to embodied wisdom. This silent transmission far exceeds the framework of traditional education. In every authentic relationship, whether between spouses, between parents and children, or between true friends, those moments of communion are created where words become superfluous. A knowing glance, a soothing presence in difficulty, a shared silence before the beauty of a sunset. These instants weave bonds more solid than all declarations. Mencius developed this idea by speaking of those communications of the heart that naturally establish themselves between beings of goodwill. These communications transcend the barriers of language, social conventions, even cultural differences. They reveal that common humanity, which is, according to him, the foundation of all true ethics. On the Taoist side, this silent communion takes on a cosmic dimension. Zhuangzi speaks to us of those privileged moments when the human being recovers their natural place in the universal order, no longer as a separate individual who bustles and demands, but as a particular expression of that great movement of harmony animating all existence. This Taoist communion is experienced particularly in contemplation of nature. Seated near a peaceful lake or under a centuries-old tree, we can experience this form of silence that connects us to something vaster than our habitual personality. It is no longer our personal silence, but our participation in the great silence that carries all things. Lao Tzu expressed this dimension by speaking of the sage who acts without acting and teaches without speaking. This apparently paradoxical formula describes that quality of presence which transforms the atmosphere without conscious effort, which inspires without preaching, which heals without intervening. It is the silence of one who has found their just place in the order of things and who, through this very rightness, becomes a factor of harmony for their surroundings. This silent communion transforms our understanding of human relationships. It makes us discover that true intimacy does not depend on the quantity of information exchanged, but on that quality of mutual presence, which allows beings to recognize each other beyond their social masks. In this shared silence, something of the very essence of each person can reveal itself and be welcomed. This dimension finds concrete applications in all aspects of our existence. In the couple, learning to be together without constantly needing to speak reveals and strengthens deep intimacy. In family, those moments of shared silence during a peaceful meal, a walk, or simply sitting together weave more lasting bonds than the liveliest conversations. Even in our relationship to the world and to ourselves, this silent communion opens new perspectives. Meditating, contemplating, simply being present to what is without seeking to analyze or modify it, these practices reconnect us to that dimension of our being which exists before and beyond all our social roles. As a Taoist text poetically expresses, in shared silence, souls recognize each other and find their common source. This mutual recognition in silence perhaps constitutes one of the most precious experiences human beings can live, one that reveals to us that we are never truly alone, that something greater carries and connects us all. Silent teaching surpasses spoken teaching, Confucius affirmed, revealing one of the deepest dimensions of his pedagogy. This phrase does not minimize the importance of verbal transmission, but points toward that superior form of education, which occurs through example, through presence, through that quality of being which communicates beyond words. In the Confucian tradition, the master's role is not limited to dispensing knowledge. It consists first in embodying the virtues they wish to transmit. This embodiment creates a silent teaching that operates by osmosis, by inspiration, by that natural force of attraction that lived wisdom exerts on those who witness it. The student learns as much by observing how their master treats a servant as by listening to their discourses on humanity. This pedagogy of silence rests on several fundamental principles. First, the cultivation of educational patience. Confucius recommended not teaching one who does not show eagerness to learn, and not helping one who makes no effort to express themselves. This pedagogical restraint creates the necessary space for the true desire to know to arise in the student, one that comes from within rather than being imposed from without. This patience manifests concretely through the art of questioning rather than asserting. Instead of hammering ready-made truths, the Confucian master sows interrogations that will germinate in the student's mind. This mutic method respects the learner's intellectual autonomy while guiding them toward their own discoveries. The master's silence after a well-posed question is often more formative than lengthy explanations. Attentive observation constitutes another pillar of this education in silence. Confucius encouraged his disciples to develop this capacity to truly see, not merely to look, but to perceive subtle nuances, significant gestures, revealing details. This cultivation of observation progressively transforms the superficiality of habitual looking into that depth of perception which characterizes wisdom. This education of the eye is necessarily accompanied by an education of the ear, learning to listen to silences as much as words, perceiving the unsaid, grasping significant inflections of tone. These capacities for fine listening develop only in inner silence. One who constantly chatters, even mentally, cannot access that quality of attention which reveals subtle messages. Contemplative meditation, though more traditionally belonging to Taoism, also finds its place in Confucian pedagogy. But it is less a meditation of escape from the world than a meditation of deepening our relationship to the world. Meditating on the classic texts, on the examples of sages from the past, on complex moral situations. These contemplative practices refine judgment and purify intention. This formation of character through silence does not neglect the emotional dimension. Confucius accorded great importance to what he called the rectification of emotions, not their repression, but their cultivation and refinement. This emotional education largely passes through learning that restraint, which allows feelings to ripen before expressing themselves, thus avoiding destructive outbursts. Intellectual humility constitutes another fruit of this education in silence. To know that one does not know, that is true knowledge, Confucius taught. This recognition of our limits, far from being discouraging, opens the space for authentic learning. One who believes they already know everything closes themselves to the teachings each situation could offer them. This pedagogy finds concrete applications in family education. Parents who themselves cultivate these qualities of silence, patience in listening, restraint in advice, attentive presence, naturally transmit these virtues to their children. This transmission operates less through discourses on the importance of silence than through the example of a life where silence has its rightful place. The progressive learning of these different dimensions of silence transforms not only the individual, but the quality of their relationships and their participation in social life. As Mencius observed, these individual transformations have a wave effect that spreads to one's surroundings, contributing to collective harmony. This education in silence does not aim to form mute or fearful beings, but persons capable of that right speech born from mature reflection and attentive listening. For as Confucius taught, right words are born from right silence, and right silence is born from a righteous heart.